So the superheroes think they win. They think they've won. They think they've saved the day. But little do they know that the supreme Ooze can never truly die. I'll just simply rest for a couple thousand years, allow them to have a misplaced sense of pride, and then I'll return with a vengeance! They'll never see the Ooze coming! Who the frick are you, and what are you doing in my evil lair?
Huh, I guess our house was built on top of your evil lair at some point.
Wait, do we actually live in a house? Hey, editor, could you make it more clear where we live? This new generation of monsters is weird even by my standards. Dude, you live in our basement. You have no real standards.
Okay, everybody just calm down. I'm Gent, this is Rehash, and you are?
I am the great supreme Ooze, the supreme conqueror of the universe!
Ooh, a conqueror of the universe. Never seen that before.
Okay, you shut up.
Okay, Mr. Ooze, sorry we broke into your house. It just happened to be underneath our house, and we can be going.
Okay, you are being uncharacteristically calm against the force of everything that is against good and justice in this world.
What, are you a Spider-Man writer?
Why would you compare me to a Spider-Man writer? Isn't he married to Mary Jane?
Ooh.
He doesn't know. He doesn't know. Know what? What are you talking about?
Yeah, Mr. Evil Ooze Man, you might want to sit down. Superheroes have definitely gotten a change in writing over the past couple years.
One could even say that the worst enemy is the writers themselves.
Right. Ooze, I think it's time you got a crash course on how superheroes are run nowadays.
Precisely. This is my adventures with Superman.
Episode 2.
Part 2.
Who are you talking to?
The episode begins with a flashback on the Kent's farm, where they're digging up Clark's old spaceship of which he arrived on Earth with, and oh my god, that thing is huge!
Wait, I always thought that Superman arrived on Earth in a tiny little space pod.
He did. And I get that they wanted to send him in a slightly bigger ship, but
that is taking the piss. How did the Kents manage to hide this from the government? Or just the random stranger? You can't blame farmland. That thing is huge.
And to all knowledge, the Kents don't have superpowers.
And a ship that size that crash lands on their country farm? Yeah, they should be dead.
So Clark steps onto the space station,
which it is the size of a space station,
and we get Big Daddy Jor-El.
Oh my goodness, that is a hunk of man meat. Are you sure that's not Odin in his younger years?
Well, the whole experience completely terrifies our poor boy Clark, and he immediately runs to his parents, which stops the whole process of whatever the hell was going on. And this, in turn, traumatizes Clark to the point where he doesn't even want to know anymore. He just is too afraid.
So he buries it back?
Yeah, that is the face of a kid who just got traumatized.
Ah, yes, psychological trauma! Now would be the perfect time to strike with all my power!
Oh, sure, yes. Go ahead and strike him as a child. I'm sure him being an adolescent would make his skin any less bulletproof.
You know, I really do not care for you.
We later cut back to modern day, where Clark and Jimmy are pulled in by Lois to their investigation of Superman room. There, they wish to get all the information they can in order to get the scoop on Superman.
Jimmy Olsen also provides his support with his weird contribution of a small-time YouTube channel called The Flamebirds, where he talks about conspiracies and extraterrestrials and the like.
But Clark Kent isn't really a big fan of this, and tries to persuade them to go see other options and other stories. But Lois is perfectly driven by the idea of realizing what Superman's purpose here is. and this motivates Superman into thinking the same. So he fakes an illness and runs off to who knows where, leaving Lois and Jimmy to get the scoop on Superman. Though it still irks me how a ship that size could just go underground and then no one notices it. Like there should have been impact damage, there should have been great destruction, and lots of people noticing it. Yet somehow, 2 farmers who just found a baby managed to cover it all up.
Well, yeah, I suppose that makes sense. I mean, a single space pod should be more than enough for a baby. I'm not entirely certain why an infant needs a full-scale Kryptonian ship when they don't even know how to speak or not poop in their pants.
Maybe not from your good guy's perspective, but from a villain's perspective, it makes perfect sense to send a warship.
This isn't Dragon Ball Z,
Isn't it? Is it not really?
You know, he's kind of got a point. Maybe not Dragon Ball, but definitely She-Ra. Well, we cut back to the walking personification of a mean girl boss as she's being tailed by a lovely couple. Well, they try to get the jump on her, but she gets the jump on them instead. Takes them out effortlessly. Then she takes their walkie and says, "Hey bitch, I know you're tailing me, so here's where I'm gonna be. We can either talk this out or we can duke it out. Your call." We then cut back to the Ken's farm, where Clark goes through the door and meets his mom. His mom is happy to see him and wonders everything about his life, and he explains everything going on in his life, including going on about Lois. But this is also when he drops the truth bomb. He needs to see the ship again. He needs to know why he's here.
We then cut to Lois and Jimmy as they're trying to do their best to one-up each other to see which one of them wears the pants between the two. But Jimmy has an advantage because he knows that Lois is in love with Clark. Am I doing this right? Anyway, they go down to the and try to see where the bad lady went to, only to discover she went to the docks.
Not bad for your first try, Ooze, but let the professionals handle it further. We then cut back to Clark, who has just dug up his little spaceship, which he makes a comment about how much bigger it's gotten.
Too many cuts makes my head go all spinny.
The jumping around editing here is a little jarring. And for the life of me, I can't really see a real reason why they would even cut it in the way that they do. What do you want, Ooze?
You're in my spot. Get out of the way.
Sorry, this is Chief Reviewer privilege.
Then please allow me to show you the privilege of real power.
Why does he get the magic space lightning?
Privilege.
So after Clark gives his dear sweet mama a goodbye hug, he goes over to his ship and activates it. Once again, Mr. Steal Your Girl, Giga Chad Jor-El, comes forward and teleports Clark into the ship itself. And he appears before him, not hologram-like, but looks like flesh and blood. But then we cut immediately back to Lois and Jimmy, who find the entrance into a large cave. Thinking that this is the entrance that they need in order to find their weird bad guy girl, they go in without noticing the obvious bomb at the very start of the tunnel. Seriously, how did you miss that? You are investigating the tunnel. How did you freaking miss that? And then we once again just cut right back over to Superman as he's talking to his AI father. I swear, these cuts are just so random in this episode. Like, just stick to a lane for more than a minute. Well, Giga Chad, Mr. Steal Your Girl, Jor-El tries to talk to Kent, but there is a massive language barrier. So, rather than tell, he shows. He shows Clark the origin of his being on Earth. The destruction of Krypton. Though, thanks to the language barrier, he has no way of knowing what the planet is or even the context. He just knows that his mommy and daddy sent him to Earth as a baby. And wait, that pod is tiny! That pod is tiny! Clark did say that it looked bigger than when he was a little kid,
though I'm not entirely certain the size comparison when you consider the fact that he only dug up the exact same spot, but he did say it was bigger. So I'm guessing the ship just grew underneath like a potato?
So what you're saying is that the Kryptonians are not only proficient with Spud-based technology, but also can have magical girl transformation sequences, and thus Superman is given his costume. Albeit he does look very badass.
What exactly's going on with superheroes nowadays? I thought Power Rangers less flamboyant than this.
Well, I think a large part about why it seems so flamboyant is that this version of Superman is clearly taking a hell of a lot of inspiration from magical girl anime. Which, weirdly enough, is not the anime I think of when I think Superman. But hey, whatever floats your boat.
So the magical girl transformation comes to an end, and we finally see the final suit of Superman.
Well, almost. Like any mother, she sees his costume and says, I can improve it. But we cut back to Lois and Jimmy still trying to search for clues on the whereabouts of the angry woman, only to discover the bombs. The bombs all over the tunnel, even down where How did they not see any of them? I'm not even going to question at this point.
But then we do a hard cut again
to a quaint little cafe where we meet some pretty boy, and he's talking to Angry Lady.
Oh, I know your history, Leslie Willis.
Wait, did he just say her name? That was her name! That was totally her name! Gent!
I'm already looking it up! So according to this, she's the supervillain Livewire.
Wait, Livewire?
Hold on. Are you telling me that she's the girl who tried to discredit Superman in the original animated series? Yeah, that Livewire. Huh. Kind of a weird leap from radio angry talk show host to black market arms dealer, if you catch my drift. So the context of the meeting is pretty straightforward. She wants out of the city because she has a hit on her. He wants all the stolen tech that she stole from him and his organization. So they reach a bit of an impasse. But our girl is fairly smart, not only rigging the entire sewer system to blow, but also dispersing the technology to several different people. So even if he tries anything funny with her, he wouldn't get the tech. But any ground that might have been covered is now uncovered because Lois and Jimmy decided to pop out of the ground at the exact moment, which causes a fight between Livewire and Pretty Boy.
Is we really calling him Pretty Boy?
Well, he doesn't have a name yet, though his fighting style seems awfully familiar. But regardless, Livewire finally breaks out her super tech, which gives her lightning abilities. And she goes on effectively a killing spree, fighting the Pretty Boy, Lois, and Jimmy all at the same time, while causing a little bit of collateral damage.
We hard cut once again to Superman as his mother is giving him a pair of tidy whities. And we finally get the first look at the complete Superman design. And then his father comes in with his cell phone, showing that Jimmy has been trying to call him, and hearing his message, Superman flies off. We cut back to the fighting, and they're fighting. They're definitely fighting. Though I'm not really feeling it. I'm not entirely certain why. But when Lois and Jimmy get in danger, he's a bird, he's a plane, he comes in to save the day. We finally get to see the full-fledged Superman of this show. Superman and Lois exchange an awkward chemistry talk, and then the fighting ensues. Which it's not really so much fighting so much as it is a very flashy light show. That's really all we can say about it, really.
Agreed, there's not really much fighting whatsoever. In fact, Pretty Boy ends up damaging the tech that Livewire was wearing, causing a massive overload during the fight. Superman, being Superman, of course immediately flies over to her, not trying to defeat her, but trying to save her from herself, getting electrocuted in the process. But then, he's able to remove the power source and destroy it. But he also gets weird flashes of visions with the technology. Clearly, this technology she's using has something to do with Krypton, but that doesn't come in till later date, I'm assuming. For now, we just gotta settle with Livewire's defeat.
And Pretty Boy ending up getting away.
Well, that's going to be a future plot later on. So, Superman ends up saving the day, and during the spectacle, ends up cleaning up all of the damage that was caused, putting cars back to normal, being a good little Boy Scout.
What's with the Amazo tech sign?
I'm sure it's not relevant. And so the day is saved. Also, Jimmy Olsen gets a picture.
And the picture is turned into Mr. White,
and Mr. White ends up stopping the presses in order to print their story.
And, of course, a mutual respect is born between Lois and Jimmy.
So we really don't want to admit it, but
for a debut Superman fight, like a full costume, Superman, cape, cowl, everything, this was pretty
lackluster. I've seen better animated fights in the 1980s. What was that? That was just nothing but a freaking light show and fancy flying. There was no actual combat. Well, Superman heads back to his apartment, where he gets a phone call from Lois, and saying that she's here. He quickly changes back into Clark Kent and meets her at the door. They share an awkward conversation of two people who are obviously into each other, but have not actually confessed yet. And neither one of them knows how to talk to the other of the opposite sex.
The awkward flirty humor really does remind me of She-Ra. And here comes the third best friend to ruin the moment, so yeah, it's even more like She-Ra. But Jimmy ends the episode with them showing them the paper and finding out that Dr. White may have published their story, but gave credit to the actual journalists and not them, which was kind of a dick move, and Lois is rightfully pissed.
But the show must go on as we catch Livewire. My God, is it good to finally give her a name! Is currently strapped to a bench with a collar around her neck, as Pretty Boy is no longer playing nice. She tries to do her little attitude, but gets at a controlled shock. I'm assuming she must be in a FNAF facility, as Pretty Boy is trying to get information out of her, specifically about Superman. And Pretty Boy is not allowed. No, not that one! Not that one! What? What's that one? Nope. I know that lady. Props to the series where it's due. Of all the characters that they could have introduced as one of the big bads, I did not expect Amanda Waller.
And if Amanda Waller is involved in any form of Superman content, we can assume that Task Force X, aka Suicide Squad, is coming.
But even with the promise of Amanda Waller's Suicide Squad, this episode was very underwhelming. And considering that this is the second part of a two-parter, that is not a good look.
The episode did a very good job with the build-up, and it had good character interaction. But considering that this is the debut episode of The Man of Steel, and with all the flashy build-up that they promised, they didn't really deliver when it came to the actual Supermaning at the very end.
If I had to judge the entire series on this episode alone, I probably wouldn't have watched the rest of it. Thank God that I waited until now to actually start reviewing it. That way I could binge watch it.
The story is also clearly heavily inspired by Japanese anime. But of all the anime you could have picked for freaking Superman, you went with Magical Girl? It's unique, I'll give it that. But uniqueness and good are not exclusive.
Also, TLDR, it should not have taken until the last 10 freaking minutes of the part 2 episode to learn the name of the big bad of the 2 episodes.
TLDR, there's a lot of flaws. There's an insatiable amount of flaws. But flaws can be improved. And we know there are 2 seasons of this, so clearly they're doing something right. Not sure what, but we'll have to see.
And with that being said, I'm Cartoon Gent,
I'm Rehash,
and I am Devin Ooze.
And this has been a Gentleman's Chat, and we'll see you all next time.
Good. Now get out of my house!
Okay, I'm going!
Why does he get the purple lightning?